What if the most overlooked queen in biblical history was the one God honored in the words of Jesus himself? What if her journey wasn't just a royal expedition, but a prophetic mission that speaks to you, right now? Beloved, if these stories stirs something in your soul, subscribe to Bible Stories Unmasked, where truth meets grace. Also hit the like button and share this with your friends, because someone you love might be waiting for this light. Let's flood the world with God's truth, bold hearts and tender love. Come with me. Who was the Queen of Sheba? A myth? A monarch? A messenger from Africa to Israel's greatest king? Her story stretches beyond gold, camels, and riddles. It's a trail of truth hidden in plain sight. A royal encounter that defied borders, power, gender, and race. This is more than history. This is a divine breadcrumb, a link between Africa and the throne of heaven. And her footsteps might just lead you back to your forgotten. Before we continue, I would like you to say this aloud: I am not forgotten. I declare that my steps are guided, my voice matters, and my story is not finished. Before her sandals touched Jerusalem's stone, before her name echoed across kingdoms, there was a world already spinning with power, promise, and divine tension. Israel stood at its peak. Solomon, the son of David, ruled with a wisdom that made nations tremble. Peace surrounded his borders. Gold flowed like water. And the temple of the Lord had just been completed. It was more than a building, it was a statement. A visible throne for an invisible God. And the one who sat on Israel's throne was no ordinary man. Solomon was gifted, asked for wisdom, received glory. And his fame had begun to seep across deserts, mountains, and seas. But far beyond the Jordan and the gates of Jerusalem, there was another kingdom rising. A land rich with incense and ivory. A people known for trade, intellect, and royalty. And ruling over them was a woman. A queen. A sovereign in her own right. Sheba. And when the rumors of a wise king in Israel reached her ears, she didn't ignore them. She couldn't. Something stirred deep within her spirit. Something too powerful to silence. A hunger to understand what no one in her kingdom could answer. Who was the God behind Solomon's wisdom? What kind of king builds a house for a deity, and says that even the heavens cannot contain him? The Queen of Sheba had everything, except revelation. And revelation is what pulled her toward destiny. History rarely gives her the mic. But make no mistake, Sheba was no silent shadow. She was a ruler shaped by nations, but led by something deeper. A woman born of royal blood, but moved by divine hunger. Her name, in ancient tongues, carried weight. Not just Sheba, but Makeda, in Ethiopian tradition. She wasn't simply called queen. She was the kingdom. Her court was one of culture, trade, and command. Merchants bowed in her presence. Diplomats journeyed miles to hear her decisions. And through it all, she ruled, not beside a king, but alone. This was radical. In a male-dominated age, she stood as a sovereign. She did not inherit power through marriage. She embodied it. Her people honored her as wise, fierce, and deeply spiritual. Not a woman of idle luxury, but one who governed markets, waged peace, and sought the divine. But behind the crown, there was curiosity. A sacred unrest. Something in her could not be stilled by jewels or incense. She had tasted the glory of her throne, but it was not enough. And then, the stories began. Of a man unlike any other. A king whose mind seemed touched by the heavens. A ruler who discerned the motives of hearts. Whose God did not live in a statue, but in fire and cloud. The tales reached her in whispers at first. Then in bold reports from traders and travelers. Solomon. His name cut through the noise of lesser kings. And the more she heard, the more her soul stirred. This was not political intrigue. This was personal. What if this king knew something she didn't? What if the God he served was real? She could have ignored it. She had wealth, power, position. But true royalty does not ignore the call of wisdom. It started as a whisper. Nothing more than passing words on the tongues of traitors. But whispers have a way of finding ears that are ready to hear. Across scorching sands and shifting borders, the reports grew louder. Stories of Solomon's justice. His impossible judgments. His mind that pierced deception like sunlight through fog. A mother pleading for a child, a king who knew how to expose truth without a sword. Riddles answered before they were finished. Complexities untangled in mere moments. And the most astonishing part? He gave the credit away. The Lord gave me wisdom, he said. Not his bloodline. Not his tutors. Not his brilliance. But God. That name, Yahweh, echoed through every report. A God unlike any she had ever known. Not carved in stone. Not confined to a temple. Not bought with gifts or silenced with rituals. A God who spoke. A God who chose people. A God who revealed mysteries. The Queen of Sheba had heard of many deities. Her lands were full of gods, fertility, war, weather, prosperity. But none of them moved her spirit like this. There was something unsettling about the name of the God of Israel. Not because it frightened her, but because it felt real. She knew wisdom when she saw it. She ruled by it. But this was different. Solomon wasn't just ruling, he was listening to someone. And if the rumors were true, that someone answered him. The queen wrestled with it in silence. Should she send a messenger? Should she wait for more information? But every report only deepened her unrest. This wasn't about admiration. This was about transformation. She could not afford to stay comfortable. Because deep down, she knew, some truths must be pursued face to face. And so, with the weight of a nation behind her, and the fire of divine curiosity within her, she made a decision. She would not just send questions, she would carry them herself. Not in weakness, but in royalty. Not as one seeking favor, but as one searching for revelation. The Queen of Sheba was about to leave her palace. Not to conquer, but to witness a greater king. Royal decisions carry royal weight. And when the Queen of Sheba resolved to pursue wisdom, she didn't move in silence. She moved with spectacle, because purpose leaves a trail. Her journey wasn't a solo pursuit. It became a national mission. Her entire court adjusted around this one act of obedience. Camels were loaded, not with survival rations, but with tribute, gold, spices, rare stones, gifts for a king she had never met. Not bribes, but offerings of honor. Hundreds traveled with her, attendants, advisors, soldiers, servants. A mobile palace crawling across the desert like a wave of wealth and wonder. The sun scorched the earth beneath their feet. The nights were cold. The route dangerous. But queens are not shaped in comfort, they are forged in conviction. Every mile tested her resolve. But the queen kept moving. Because what she was after was not comfort. It was confirmation. This wasn't a trade route. This was a pilgrimage. She didn't need more riches. She needed something her crown couldn't give her. How long did the journey take? Weeks? Months? No exact record tells us. But we know this, she believed that what waited on the other side was worth everything it cost to get there. Her feet pressed into soil foreign to her ancestors. Her breath mingled with desert wind. Her prayers, silent but fierce, rose with the dust around her. And perhaps along the way, between sunrise and exhaustion, she began to feel it. That this journey was more than political. It was prophetic. She wasn't just coming to meet Solomon. She was walking into a divine appointment. Something inside her already knew that when she arrived, she would not be the same woman who had left her throne. The gates of Jerusalem had seen many visitors. Traders. Kings. Warriors. Priests. But none like her. The Queen of Sheba arrived not as a beggar, not as a fan, but as a sovereign, equal in power, unmatched in presence. The city paused. Citizens whispered. Servants scattered. Even the officials of Solomon's court straightened their robes. And then, the moment heaven had written in silence. Queen met king. She stood in the royal court, draped not only in garments of royalty, but clothed in purpose. Solomon rose from his throne. Their eyes locked. Not in rivalry. Not in conquest. But in recognition. Two rulers. Two empires. Two destinies, about to intertwine. There were no games. No manipulation. She had come with questions, and he was ready with answers. But this was not a battle of intellect. This was a meeting of spirits. Of callings. Of divine stories converging under the roof of wisdom. No protocol could prepare the court for what followed. The queen opened her mouth, and released riddles that tested the soul. Mysteries that confounded scholars in her homeland. And one by one, Solomon answered. Not with pride, but with clarity. As though the Spirit of God whispered through his lips. She didn't flinch. She didn't flatter. She listened. Because truth, when it's real, doesn't need decoration. It pierces. It transforms. And in that royal chamber, something began to shift. She came to test a king. But instead, she was being examined by the truth she didn't expect. This wasn't about Solomon anymore. It was about the source behind him. The queen had met many kings. Negotiated with emperors. Led battles and shaped treaties. But never, never, had she encountered a ruler whose brilliance flowed from intimacy with the divine. The court watched. The heavens watched. And even the earth, in that moment, seemed to hold its breath. She had crossed nations for this day. And the day had not disappointed. She did not come to flatter Solomon. She came to challenge him. Not to embarrass. But to see if the stories were true. She had heard that his mind was sharp. That he solved riddles before they could be finished. That he judged with supernatural precision. But now, she would see for herself. And so, the questions began. Not simple ones. Not puzzles for entertainment. But riddles wrapped in meaning. Questions born from years of ruling, reading, and wrestling. She asked about life. About purpose. About mysteries that even her own court could not explain. Questions about justice, about human nature, about the heavens. And Solomon answered. Not with cleverness. But with stillness. As though he had already heard them before she spoke. His words didn't dazzle. They uncovered. He didn't argue. He revealed. His answers were not rehearsed. They were rooted in something deeper than intellect. They were drawn from the well of divine wisdom. And as she listened, something began to shift inside her. The queen who had come with authority now sat with humility. Not because she was lesser, but because truth demands honor, even from the greatest among us. She began to realize. This was not just a man answering questions. This was a man connected to the source of all answers. The more he spoke, the more her walls fell. Not her dignity, but her defenses. For the first time in her reign, she encountered someone who wasn't impressed by her title. but could still speak directly to her soul. And that is the mark of true wisdom. It does not seek to win. It seeks to reveal. The test she brought had flipped. She had become the one tested. Not by Solomon's judgment, but by the God who had given it to him. And yet, she didn't resist it. She welcomed it. Because something in her had longed to be seen. Not just respected. And in that sacred space, she wasn't a queen trying to prove herself. She was a seeker, finally receiving what she came for. She had heard rumors. She had listened to witnesses. She had prepared her heart for all. But nothing could have prepared her for what she encountered. Wisdom wasn't just in Solomon's answers. It was in the way he ruled. In the order of his palace. In the way his servants stood, dignified, not oppressed. In how his people spoke his name, not with fear, but with honor. She saw a nation ruled by peace. A kingdom structured by the hand of heaven. And at the center of it all. Not just a man. But a covenant. The Queen of Sheba looked around and realized. She had stepped into something holy. She had known glory in her own land. Riches, music, architecture, power. But here, she saw glory wrapped in order. Authority wrapped in humility. Power wrapped in purpose. It was more than admiration. It was recognition. She was witnessing the fingerprints of God on a man's life. And that shook her more than gold or wisdom ever could. She could no longer remain silent. Her heart, full of awe, erupted in words. Blessed be the Lord your God. Who has delighted in you. And set you on the throne of Israel. Not her gods. Not the deities of her ancestors. But his God. The living God. She didn't just honor Solomon. She worshipped the one who gave him wisdom. The invisible presence that shaped the visible world around her. This was not politics anymore. This was not ceremony. This was transformation. A queen had come seeking wisdom. And what she found was worship. What she found was revelation. What she found was the truth she had always sensed but never seen. Her crown didn't shield her from the presence of God. Her throne didn't disqualify her from divine encounter. And in that moment, she became more than royal. She became awakened. The Queen of Sheba had entered Jerusalem with questions. But she would leave with a testimony. No meeting of kings, or queens, ends without exchange. But this was more than diplomacy. It was destiny wrapped in honor. The Queen of Sheba had not come empty-handed. She had prepared her offering long before her camels ever left her gates. Mountains of gold. Spices so rare, their fragrance lingered in the air for days. Precious stones that glittered like desert stars. No other tribute like it had ever entered Israel's borders. But this wasn't a transaction. This was reverence. She wasn't paying for wisdom. She was honoring what she had witnessed. And Solomon received her gifts. Not as a taker. But as a giver in return. He lavished her with royal treasures. With everything she desired, and more than she expected. But it wasn't the material that mattered. It was the message behind the moment. When honor meets revelation, heaven releases overflow. Two kingdoms met. Two cultures collided. But instead of conflict, there was covenant. Instead of competition, there was blessing. She didn't leave Jerusalem with answers alone. She left with evidence. That divine encounters change what you carry. What she took back to Sheba was more than treasure. She carried seeds, spiritual ones. And generations would feel the weight of what she received. What if that moment wasn't just historical? What if it was prophetic? Because when a woman of power humbles herself before the presence of God, something shifts. Not just for her, but for her nation, and her lineage. She gave generously. But what she received was immeasurable. Solomon, wise as he was, understood. This was not just a guest. This was a key. Her arrival was not chance. It was divine orchestration. The gifts that changed hands that day weren't just currency. They were covenantal symbols. A sign that God's glory was not locked in one people, but reaching across borders, bloodlines, and beyond. It was a sacred transaction. A divine exchange. Gold for wisdom. Questions for truth. Honor for legacy. Scripture leaves us in suspense. The Queen of Sheba enters Jerusalem with fire and reverence. And then, the curtain falls. The Bible tells us she returned to her own land. But it doesn't say what she carried back. And so, history began to whisper. And tradition began to sing. In the ancient chronicles of Ethiopia, a different ending is preserved. One that changes everything. The Kebra Nagast, the royal record of Ethiopia, declares that Sheba did not leave alone. She left carrying the seed of Solomon. A child. A son. A bloodline. His name. Menelik. Born of royalty. Raised in Sheba. And, according to tradition, destined to return to his father's kingdom. To sit in Solomon's court. To learn his ways. And eventually, to carry the Ark of the Covenant back to Ethiopia. It's a story cloaked in mystery. Not confirmed by Scripture. But echoed in the faith of millions. Could it be that the line of David extended into Africa through this woman? That a queen's obedience birthed a prophetic dynasty? For centuries, Ethiopian monarchs claimed descent from Solomon. Through Sheba. Through Menelik. Through a divine appointment that shook kingdoms. The idea isn't just romantic. It's revolutionary. A black queen. A Jewish king. A shared destiny. And a son who would become a symbol of divine promise stretching beyond borders. If true, this means the covenant was never limited. It was always reaching outward. Always drawing in the unexpected. Always welcoming the ones others ignored. The Queen of Sheba didn't just leave with treasure. She may have left with legacy. A child of two worlds. A seed of two destinies. A reminder that when God moves, He moves through wombs, through nations, through prophecy. And even today, that child, that lineage, that possibility, still raises questions the world has yet to answer. From silence, to Scripture. But this story wasn't just about her. It was about you. Because the Queen of Sheba's story isn't over. It lives every time someone dares to question what they've been taught. Every time a black woman refuses to be erased. Every time a soul says, I want truth, no matter where it takes me. She came bearing questions. But she left with something greater. Wisdom. Honor. And perhaps even a royal lineage. What about you? Will you stay where it's comfortable, safe, and predictable? Or will you begin your own journey toward the King? Will you let your past define you? Or will you let your pursuit of God reshape your identity? Like Sheba, maybe you weren't born in the right place. Maybe your name isn't celebrated. Maybe your skin, your voice, your story have been called unworthy. But God never agreed with that. He invited the Queen of Sheba. He received her offering. And He etched her in His eternal story. The same invitation stands for you today. Will you rise like she did? Will you seek wisdom? Will you ask your questions, no matter how uncomfortable? The next one who defies expectation. Who tears through the silence? Who proves that your race, your region, your gender were never disqualifications. They were the setting of a greater purpose. So ask. Seek. Knock. And when you find Him, lay it all at His feet, just like she did. Let's say this together. I am not invisible. I am not disqualified. I am chosen to carry wisdom, faith, and legacy. And I will not be forgotten in God's story. Let this message take root. Speech balloon, drop a comment below, a verse, a thought, a prayer. Maybe it's something God whispered to your heart while watching. Or maybe it's something someone else needs to read today. Your words could be someone's confirmation. Your testimony could stir faith in a weary soul. God bless you.